The Minnesota Office of the State Auditor presents this preview of TIF reporting redesign. The purpose of this video is to introduce our initial vision of a redesigned TIF annual reporting form so that we can get feedback from people who complete and utilize these forms. We'd like to get feedback on the overall structure, content, and design of this initial vision by September 20th so that we can adjust and improve it accordingly. We then anticipate developing a refined beta version for testing and more detailed feedback next summer. We anticipate implementing the new redesigned forms for 2025 forms due in the summer of 2026. Please access the initial draft of the redesigned form at the link shown here, which is on the same page where this video can be found. Please note that it is still in development, only partially populated, and not all data flows and messages have been programmed, so please just focus on the overall design and content. Then please complete a short feedback survey, also found where the form and this video are posted. If you have additional feedback, you can also email me at jason.nord@osa.state.mn.us. Please put redesign in the subject line to help me track the feedback. Let's talk about the goals and reasons for change. They fall into two categories: function and style improvements and content improvements. The function and style improvements include improving the accessibility of the form to reach compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, improving the overall look and feel, usability, and ease of data entry, and improving the organization of the form. With respect to the first two goals, we hope that you'll notice things like better labeling and instruction, the lack of merged cells and headers, the lack of blank rows and columns, better color schemes and contrasts, and less scrolling. For example, in the current form, the tables and data entry are often disjointed and spread out in a way that requires a lot of horizontal scrolling. This example is from the PAYGO tab, but you can also see it with the debt and interfund loan tabs. In the new form, the PAYGO tab and the bonds and loans tabs will simply list the obligations, allowing more to be added. A link will then take you to a separate data entry screen for each debt. The data entry screens will be neater and allow more compact entry in columns, and the error alert and information messages are more readily visible. We then bring the data together in a debt summary tab so that you don't have to browse a bunch of tabs to look at the full information for the district. This is part of the changes to the form's organization. Let's overview how each of the existing form tabs get reflected in the redesigned form. First, the Home tab is being split into two tabs. The first tab is an Instructions tab that explains the form and has links to the instructions and resources. Then a new Review and Submit tab at the end will contain the important table of error messages that need to be resolved before the form can be submitted in SAFES, among other new features. The Overview and District Info tabs in the existing form are combined into a single District Info tab, except that we broke out Special Legislation as a separate tab, as it's the only section that needs multiple columns and is a distinct subject. The Debt tab is being renamed to more specifically reference traditional bonds. As we saw earlier, the Bonds tab will list each bond, which will each have their own data entry tab, allowing for up to 15 bonds to be entered. And then the Debt Summary tab will capture all of the different debt info in one spot for ease of review and examination. The same new organization applies to PAYGO notes. And the Interfund Loans tab gets the same treatment, except that the Loans tab will only list due to loans, and there is an additional split to separately report due from Interfund loans on separate Lent Funds tabs with corresponding entry tabs for each due from loan. Due to loans are debt obligations of a district that the increment is used to repay, whereas due from interfund loans are of a different character and are not a debt obligation as much as they represent the status of where increment is being held. The entry screens for the lent funds require less information, and only the due to loans are included in the debt summary tab. Project costs will be captured in a significantly new manner. The use of proceeds for each obligation will be collected on the data entry screens for each bond, PAYGO, or loan. Then a new Expenditures tab will be used for reporting any direct expenditures of increment that isn't financed through a bond, PAYGO, or loan. This disaggregated collection of how proceeds and increments are expended will then be summarized on a new Expenditure Summary tab. The new Expenditure Summary tab largely mirrors the current form's Project Cost tab, but also displays the breakouts by debt type with various subtotals and totals. The next 5 tabs will largely stay the same with minor adjustments. The one exception is that the entry of revenues will no longer be done on the Revenue, Expenditure, and Balance tab, and that will be done on a new Revenues tab earlier in the form. It will still be displayed on the Revenue, Expenditures, and Balance tab, but the earlier entry prevents false error messages from appearing prematurely. And lastly, there will be 4 additional new tabs. One is for identifying returned increment. Legislative clarifications in 2023 as to how admin and pooling limits should recognize returned increments now require distinguishing the types of or reasons for returns, like excess increment versus extra surplus increments versus remedy payments. A new tab is added to collect hazardous substance subdistrict info. Another is for identifying parcels, and the last is for monitoring the 6-year rule. The Comments tab is being deleted because a comment box is being added to every tab. So this then is the new organization of the redesigned form. It might look like a big proliferation of tabs, but the vast majority of the information reported is the same as before, and many of the additional tabs are meant for better flow and visualization. There are, however, as noted, some additions and changes to the content being collected. So let's now turn to the content changes. First and foremost, the main reason for initiating this redesign is to improve the ability of authorities to track and monitor compliance with the TIF Act. The current form collects data but doesn't particularly help track important details or alert you to potential compliance issues. The better you can monitor and spot such issues, the more equipped you are to address them before we intervene with oversight inquiries. This improved tracking requires collecting new and/or more detailed data. We hope the additions will help authorities maintain important information in one spot on the form. Lastly, we add improved reporting of hazardous substance subdistricts, which the current form fails to identify. With respect to improved compliance tracking and monitoring for authorities, we attempt to accomplish this in several ways. First, we include more detailed reporting of in-district and out-district activity. There is already an expectation that authorities are monitoring this in order to comply with the 6-year rule and pooling limits. But rather than just hope that this is being done outside the form, we include it to ensure that it is being tracked and monitored. This should also help authorities keep tabs on it over time. Second, we are now adding alert messages in addition to error messages so that we can help flag a variety of potential issues. Error messages mean that some data entry is wrong or missing and must be fixed before submitting the form. An alert is helpful when the data entry is correct and complete, but might indicate a problem. They point out things to look out for or things that need an explanation. And third, we've added sections on the Review and Submit tab to help monitor the admin expense limit and pooling limit. And we've added a new tab for monitoring the 6-year rule. So let's look at the first approach of improved tracking of in-district and out-district expenditures and obligations in a bit more detail. The current form is largely insufficient to this end. The only reporting of out-district costs is a single line, line 22, on the Project Cost tab, the accuracy of which has not inspired confidence. Clearly, there should be more tracking going on by authorities. The current reporting of project costs is reported above that on the first 21 lines of the Project Cost tab. Categories of costs are reported for all proceeds and increments other than PAYGOs, and then the documented costs reported on the PAYGO tab are carried over and displayed to identify the total project costs. One option for more in-district versus out-district detail was to ask for each of these lines to be broken out by in-district and out-district amounts, but that seemed a bit excessive. The more important factor is to identify total in-district and out-district breakouts for each obligation. So when entering data for each obligation, the new data entry tabs will, as they had before on the old form, have sections to enter details about the obligations, payment activity on the obligations, and principal and interest due in the next year. A new section is added for entering the use of proceeds for each obligation, and we ask for in-district and out-district breakouts. Hopefully authorities are already tracking this and can report it fairly easily, but for some with multiple obligations, it may require additional work in the first year of the new forms to identify these amounts for each of the obligations. So we recognize that the transition to the new form may take additional work, but shouldn't be an ongoing burden. A new tab is also being added to collect parcel information. The 2023 changes to the 6-year rule require parcels to be removed beginning in the 6th year when they are not subject to outstanding obligations. Normally, whole districts are pledged to the payment of bonds and loans, but for PAYGOs, they are often tied to specific parcels, so there's a need to track which parcels are and are not subject to PAYGO notes. This is not needed until the 5-year-old date is reached. There's a lot of parcel changes that occur in the initial years of a lot of districts, so waiting to report parcels until the year in which the 5-year-old date is reached will help avoid headaches. We currently envision listing parcels where their status can be marked as current, removed, or former parcel ID for those parcels that get subsequently replaced by new parcels due to plats, splits, or combinations. And then there will be a drop-down to identify which PAYGO note is associated with the parcel, if any. This will help you track which parcels need to be removed or have been removed. We may seek to populate this list initially with data collected from the county if possible. And we are particularly interested in feedback as to whether this would be better as a separate form, perhaps collected at a separate time. Next, I have mentioned adding in various alerts. Here's one example where we can, in the appropriate year, pop up an alert as a reminder that the 4-year-old notification is or was due to the county. These alerts are just a way to prompt you for things to look out for. We can also add more informational messages to help you navigate through the form. The new Review and Submit tab will not only summarize red error messages that must be resolved before forms can be submitted, but it will also highlight and list alerts that popped up in the form for anyone that's reviewing the form to take note of. The Review and Submit tab will also have 2 sections to aid in monitoring compliance with the admin expense limit and the overall pooling limit. These limits are not applied until decertification, but these sections can help signal if the district is currently running over or under the limit and aid in keeping tabs on each. And a new tab will be added to aid in monitoring the 6-year rule, which is perhaps the one area where there's been the most compliance issues, and which is generally regarded as the most important restriction on tax increment financing. It will largely mirror the tracking tool released last year, and will largely be fed by information entered on other tabs. These tools do not replace the need for legal advice, but should help authorities track and understand these important limits. The other new addition is to capture limited information on hazardous substance subdistricts. There are not many of these subdistricts, but prior reporting has been lacking, and the new form will capture key bits of information to enable proper monitoring for how those increments are used and to help ensure they decertify in a timely manner. Aside from these bigger changes, there are also a variety of new fields on various tabs. Some, like those listed here, will require responses or entries, while other additions, like those seen here, are fields that we populate and display and don't require entries. And that concludes our preview. Please take a look at the form and complete the survey found on the link shown here. Thank you for giving this your attention, and we look forward to your feedback.